The sound of bones snapping echoed across the canyon like a gunshot, and Penelope Fairchild did not scream. She bit down hard on her leather glove instead, tasting dust and sweat as her horse bolted away into the Oklahoma plains, leaving her crumpled at the bottom of a rocky ravine with her left forearm bent at an angle that made her stomach turn. It was June 1882, and the sun blazed overhead like a forge, turning the red earth into an oven that would cook her alive if she did not move soon. She was 3 miles from Tulsa, maybe 4, and the closest ranch was the Quinn property, which sat another 2 miles east through scrubland thick with rattlesnakes and scorpions. Nobody knew she had ridden out this far to check the water rights her father claimed along the canyon, and nobody would come looking until sundown at the earliest. Penelope pushed herself up with her good arm, her vision swimming with pain. She was 22 years old, and she had seen her father set broken bones on cattle and horses more times than she could count. She knew what needed to be done, even if every nerve in her body screamed against it. Her arm hung useless at her side, the fracture somewhere in the middle of her forearm, probably both bones from the way it wobbled when she tried to move. She needed splints, she needed bandages, and she needed to set the bone before the swelling got so bad that nothing would help. The canyon walls rose steep on either side, but she had fallen near a cluster of dead juniper trees that the flash floods had stripped bare. Penelope crawled toward them on her knees, dragging her injured arm carefully, each movement sending fresh waves of agony through her body. She found 2 branches that looked straight enough, each about a foot long, and used her teeth to tear strips from her cotton underskirt. The fabric was already soaked with sweat, but it would have to do. She sat with her back against a boulder, positioned her broken arm across her lap, and closed her eyes for just a moment. Then she grasped her own wrist with her good hand, felt for the break with trembling fingers, and pulled hard while pushing the bent section with her palm. The bone shifted with a grinding sensation that made her see stars, but she held firm, forcing the pieces back into alignment as best she could manage. Her breath came in ragged gasps, but still she did not cry out. When the arm looked straight again, she quickly positioned the branches on either side and wrapped them tight with the fabric strips, working with practiced efficiency despite the shaking in her hands. By the time she finished, the sun had moved a handspan across the sky. Penelope knew she could not stay in the canyon. The temperature would drop fast after dark, and she had no water, no supplies, nothing but the clothes on her back and a broken arm bound in juniper wood and torn fabric. She hauled herself upright using the boulder for support and started climbing the canyon wall one-handed, finding footholds in the crumbling red stone, ignoring the pain that radiated from her arm with every jarring movement. It took her nearly an hour to reach the rim. When she finally pulled herself over the edge, she lay flat on her back for several minutes, staring at the cloudless sky, trying to remember which direction she had been riding when her horse spooked at the rattlesnake. East toward the Quinn ranch, she decided. Thomas Quinn was a hard man from what she had heard in town, but he was not cruel, and he would have a doctor or at least someone who could help her. She started walking. The prairie stretched endless in every direction, broken only by occasional stands of cottonwood and scrub oak. Her mouth was already dry as cotton, and she knew better than anyone that June in Oklahoma could kill you faster than a bullet if you were not careful. But she kept moving, one foot in front of the other, cradling her splinted arm against her chest. She had been walking for perhaps an hour when she heard hoofbeats. Penelope turned, shading her eyes with her good hand, and saw a rider coming fast from the north. The horse was a big bay gelding, and the man in the saddle sat easy despite the speed, his hat pulled low against the sun. She raised her good arm and waved, and the rider changed direction, heading straight for her. He pulled up in a cloud of dust, and Penelope found herself looking up at a man maybe a year or two older than herself, with dark hair that curled at his collar and gray eyes that took in her disheveled state in one quick sweep. He was lean and weathered, dressed in dusty work clothes and a faded blue shirt, with a gun belt slung around his hips and a coil of rope tied to his saddle. "Miss, you look like you have been through hell," he said, swinging down from his horse. His voice was deeper than she expected, rough but not unkind. "My horse threw me in the canyon back there," Penelope said, proud that her voice came out steady. "I need to get to town or to the nearest ranch." The man's gaze dropped to her arm, bound in its makeshift splint, and his expression changed. He stepped closer, and she saw his jaw tighten. "That is a break," he said. "It was not a question." "Yes. And you said it yourself. There was nobody else to do it." He stared at her for a long moment, and she saw something shift in his eyes, something like respect mixed with disbelief. "My name is Gabriel Quinn," he said finally. "The ranch is about a mile east. Can you ride double, or do you need me to make a travois?" "I can ride," Penelope said, though in truth she was not entirely sure. Gabriel must have seen the uncertainty in her face because he moved to her side and offered his arm. "Let me help you up then. Nice and slow." His hand was steady under her good elbow as she put her foot in the stirrup. The bay gelding stood perfectly still, well-trained and calm, while Gabriel boosted her into the saddle and then swung up behind her. His arm came around her waist, careful not to jostle her injury, and he gathered the reins. "Hold on to the saddle horn if you need to," he said close to her ear. "We will take it easy." They rode at a gentle walk, and Penelope was grateful for it. Even so, each step sent vibrations through her body that made her arm throb. Gabriel's chest was solid against her back, and she could feel the controlled strength in the way he managed the horse, keeping the gait as smooth as possible. "You are Silas Fairchild's daughter," Gabriel said after a while. It was not a question, but she answered anyway. "Penelope Fairchild. I have seen you in town. You usually ride with your father when he comes to check the boundary markers. He is getting older. I help where I can." She paused. "You are Thomas Quinn's son?" "I am. My father runs the cattle. I manage the horses." "I have heard you have the best quarter horses in the territory." She felt rather than saw him smile. "We do all right." The Quinn ranch came into view gradually, first as a dark line of trees along a creek, then as buildings that resolved into a substantial house, a large barn, corrals, and several outbuildings. It was bigger than Penelope had expected, prosperous, and well-maintained. Gabriel rode straight to the house and called out as they approached. A woman emerged from the front door, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 50, with silver-streaked brown hair and sharp blue eyes that immediately fixed on Penelope's splinted arm. "Good Lord, Gabriel, what happened?" "Horse threw her in the canyon. She set her own arm before I found her." There was something in his voice when he said it, something that made the woman look at Penelope with new eyes. "Bring her inside. I will get water and clean bandages. Gabriel, ride into town and fetch Dr. Harrison. Tell him it is urgent." "No," Penelope said quickly. "Please, I do not want to be any trouble. If you could just help me get back to my father's place." "Nonsense," the woman said firmly. "That arm needs proper care and you look half dead from the heat. I am Margaret Quinn, and you will stay here until the doctor has seen you. Gabriel, go." Gabriel helped Penelope down from the horse with careful hands, and she found herself leaning on him more than she wanted to admit. Her legs felt shaky, and the world tilted slightly when her feet hit the ground. He steadied her with an arm around her waist, and Margaret came to her other side. "I have you," Gabriel said quietly. "Just a few more steps." They got her into the house and settled in a chair in the kitchen, which was blessedly cool after the brutal heat outside. Margaret brought water, and Penelope drank gratefully while the older woman examined her makeshift splint. "This is good work," Margaret said, surprise evident in her voice. "You lined the bones up straight by the feel of it. Where did you learn to do this?" "My father. He has set bones on animals. I did what I remembered watching him do." Margaret looked up at Gabriel, who still stood nearby. "Go on, fetch the doctor. She will be fine here with me." Gabriel hesitated, his gaze on Penelope's face. "You are sure you are all right?" "I am sure," Penelope said, though her arm felt like it was on fire and her head was beginning to pound from the heat and dehydration. He nodded slowly, then turned and left. Penelope heard the bay's hoofbeats fade as he rode toward Tulsa at a gallop. Margaret brought more water and a cool cloth for Penelope's face and neck. "You are lucky Gabriel was out checking the fence lines. That is rough country out there, and it would have been a long walk back to town." "I know, I am grateful. How long were you out there after you fell?" "I am not sure. 2 hours, maybe 3. Margaret shook her head. "And you climbed out of the canyon and walked with a broken arm. That takes grit, girl. More than most men I know would have." Penelope did not know what to say to that, so she just sipped her water and tried not to think about the pain. Margaret busied herself making tea and cutting bread and cold meat, insisting that Penelope eat something. The food helped settle her stomach, and the tea was sweet and strong, reviving her somewhat. Gabriel returned an hour later with Dr. Harrison, a portly man with mutton-chop whiskers and kind brown eyes. He examined Penelope's arm with gentle fingers, asking her to describe exactly how she had fallen and how she had set the break. "Remarkable," he said when she finished. "Miss Fairchild, you may have saved your own arm. If you had left it misaligned and tried to walk all the way back to town, the damage could have been much worse. As it is, the break looks clean, and you have done a good job of stabilizing it." He looked at her with professional respect. "I am going to set it properly now, with plaster bandages, but I want you to know that what you did took not only courage but skill." The setting process was agony despite the laudanum the doctor gave her, but Penelope gritted her teeth and endured it. When it was done, her arm was encased in proper plaster from her elbow to her knuckles, and Dr. Harrison gave Margaret strict instructions about care and watching for signs of infection or improper healing. She should not be moved for at least a few days, he said. The shock and the heat exhaustion alone warrant rest, never mind the broken arm. "Can she stay here?" "Of course," Margaret said immediately. "We have a spare room." "No, I should get home," Penelope protested. "My father will worry." "I will ride to your father's place and let him know you are safe," Gabriel offered. "Where is his ranch?" 4 miles south of town on the creek. "But you have done so much already." "It is no trouble." Gabriel's gray eyes met hers, and she saw genuine concern there. "You need to rest. Let us handle the details." Penelope wanted to argue, but exhaustion was crashing over her in waves now that the immediate crisis had passed. She nodded, and Gabriel headed out again, tireless despite the long day. Margaret helped her to the spare bedroom, a simple but comfortable room with whitewashed walls and a window that looked out over the corrals. "There is a nightgown in the dresser," Margaret said. "Let me help you change, and then you should sleep." Penelope slept deeply and without dreams, her body demanding rest after the ordeal. When she woke, the light coming through the window was golden with late afternoon, and she could hear voices outside. She lay still for a moment, taking stock of her body. Her arm throbbed with a deep, steady ache, but it was manageable. The rest of her felt bruised and battered, but nothing else was seriously wrong. There was a soft knock at the door, and Margaret entered with a tray. You are awake. Good. I brought soup and more tea. Gabriel spoke with your father. He wanted to come get you immediately, but Gabriel and the doctor both told him you needed to rest first. He will come tomorrow to check on you. Thank you, Penelope said, embarrassed by how much help she was accepting. You have all been very kind. Kindness has nothing to do with it, Margaret said briskly. What you did today, setting your own broken arm and walking out of that canyon, that showed strength most people do not have. We are happy to help someone like you. After Margaret left, Penelope ate the soup slowly, using her good hand. The window was open, and she could hear activity in the yard below. She recognized Gabriel's voice giving instructions to someone about the horses, his tone patient and clear. Despite her embarrassment at her situation, she found herself curious about the Quinn family and their ranch. She stayed in bed the rest of that day and most of the next, following Dr. Harrison's orders. Margaret checked on her regularly, bringing food and water and fresh cloths for washing. Gabriel came to the door once, asking how she was feeling, and Penelope assured him she was recovering well. She noticed how his gaze lingered on her face, as if trying to read something there, but he did not press her with questions. Her father arrived late the next afternoon, riding up to the house on his old roan mare. Penelope heard his voice in the hallway, gruff with worry, and then he was in her room, his weathered face creased with concern. "Penelope, girl, you gave me a scare," he said, sitting heavily in the chair beside her bed. "When Gabriel Quinn showed up and told me what happened, I wanted to ride straight out here, but he said you needed rest." "I am fine, Papa, just a broken arm, it will heal." Silas Fairchild looked at his daughter's plastered arm and shook his head. "Gabriel said you said it yourself. Is that true?" There was nobody else to do it. Her father was quiet for a long moment, then he reached out and squeezed her good hand. "You are your mother's daughter. She was the strongest woman I ever knew, and you are just like her." Penelope felt her throat tighten. Her mother had died when she was 16, taken by pneumonia one hard winter. She still missed her every day. "The Quinns have been good to you," her father continued. "I will make sure to thank them properly. But Penelope, you cannot take risks like riding out alone to check the water rights. If something worse had happened." "I know, Papa. I will be more careful." He stayed for an hour, telling her news from town and from their ranch. Their foreman was managing things well in her absence, and the summer grazing was good this year. When he finally left, promising to return in a few days, Penelope felt both relieved and restless. She hated being confined to bed when there was work to be done. The next morning, she got up and dressed herself with difficulty, managing to pull on a simple cotton dress that Margaret had lent her. The sleeves were a bit short, but it fit well enough, and she was tired of lying in bed. She made her way downstairs carefully, favoring her injured arm, and found Margaret in the kitchen kneading bread dough. "You should be resting," Margaret said, but there was approval in her eyes. "How do you feel?" "Better." "Restless?" "I am not used to being idle." "I imagine not." "Well, if you are up and about, you can sit at the table and keep me company while I work. There is coffee on the stove." Penelope poured herself a cup and sat down, grateful to be doing something normal. Through the window, she could see Gabriel in one of the corrals, working with a young chestnut horse. He moved with quiet confidence, his body language calm and assured as the horse circled him on a long line. "Gabriel has a gift with horses," Margaret said, following her gaze. "They trust him. It is something you cannot teach, that kind of instinct. He seems very skilled." "He is." Thomas wanted him to focus on cattle like his father, but Gabriel's heart was always with the horses. "We have built a good reputation breeding and training quarter horses thanks to him." They talked while Margaret worked, and Penelope learned that the Quinns had come to Oklahoma Territory 15 years ago, staking their claim and building the ranch from nothing. Thomas Quinn's health was failing now, Margaret admitted quietly, his heart not as strong as it once was, which meant Gabriel was taking on more and more responsibility. "He will make a good rancher when the time comes," Margaret said. "He has the head for business and the integrity to deal fairly with people. But he works too hard, that boy. He needs to find a good woman and settle down, have a life beyond just horses and cattle." Penelope felt her cheeks warm slightly at the implication in Margaret's tone. She changed the subject, asking about the bread recipe, and Margaret let it drop. Gabriel came in for lunch, dusty and sweaty from his work. He washed up at the pump outside and then joined them at the table, his surprise evident when he saw Penelope up and dressed. "Should you be out of bed?" he asked, concern in his gray eyes. "I am fine," Penelope said. "A broken arm does not mean I have to lie around like an invalid." "She is restless," Margaret said with a smile. "Takes after her mother from what Silas said." Gabriel studied Penelope for a moment, and she had the distinct feeling he was seeing her differently now, not as an injured woman who needed help, but as someone with her own strength and determination. "You gave me quite a shock when I found you out on the prairie," he said. "Walking in that heat with a broken arm after climbing out of a canyon. I have known grown men who would have just sat down and waited to be rescued." "Waiting seemed like a good way to die," Penelope said simply. "You are stronger than anyone I know," Gabriel said, and there was something in his voice that made her look up sharply. His gaze was direct, admiring, and she felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with her injury. Margaret cleared her throat softly, breaking the moment, and began passing around plates of food. The meal was simple but good. Thick slices of bread with butter and honey, cold beef, pickled vegetables from the root cellar. They ate mostly in silence, but it was a comfortable quiet, broken only by occasional comments about the ranch work and the weather. After lunch, Gabriel returned to the corrals, and Penelope helped Margaret with small tasks around the kitchen, grateful to be useful despite her limited mobility. The days fell into a gentle rhythm over the next week. Dr. Harrison came to check on her twice, pronouncing himself satisfied with the healing. Her father visited regularly, sometimes staying for supper, and Penelope noticed the easy respect between Silas Fairchild and the Quinn family. Gabriel made a point of checking on her every day, sometimes just stopping by the kitchen for a few minutes to ask how she was feeling, other times sitting with her on the front porch in the evening after his work was done. They talked about horses and cattle, about the challenges of ranching in Oklahoma Territory, about books they had read and places they wanted to see someday. Penelope found herself looking forward to those conversations, drawn to Gabriel's quiet intelligence and dry humor. One evening, perhaps 10 days after her accident, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Gabriel had brought 2 glasses of lemonade, and they sipped in comfortable silence for a while. "Your arm is healing well," Gabriel said finally. "Dr. Harrison says another month and the plaster can come off. It feels like forever," Penelope admitted. "I want to get back to work on my father's ranch." "I am sure he misses your help, but Penelope—" Gabriel hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I have been thinking about what you did, setting your own arm like that. It still amazes me. I have seen men panic over much smaller injuries, but you stayed calm and did what needed to be done. There was no choice. Panic would not have helped. That is where you are wrong. Most people would have panicked anyway. You are different." He turned to face her fully, his gray eyes serious in the fading light. "You are stronger than anyone I have ever met, and I do not just mean physically. You have courage and grit, and you do not give up. Those are rare qualities." Penelope felt her face warm. You hardly know me. I know enough. I have watched you this past week and a half, how you push yourself to help despite your injury, how you never complain, how you treat everyone with kindness and respect. My mother adores you. My father, when he met you yesterday, said you reminded him of his own mother, who homesteaded alone for 2 years waiting for his father to return from the war. Your father is very kind to say so. He does not say things he does not mean. Gabriel paused, then continued more softly. Neither do I, Penelope. When I said you are stronger than anyone, I meant it. You are remarkable. Their eyes met and held. Penelope's heart was beating faster, and she recognized the feeling stirring in her chest for what it was. She was falling for Gabriel Quinn, for his steadiness and his strength, for the way he saw her not as fragile or in need of protection, but as capable and strong in her own right. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That means a great deal to me." Gabriel smiled, a rare, full smile that transformed his usually serious face. "I am glad." They sat together as darkness fell, talking about everything and nothing, and when Gabriel finally stood to go check on the horses one last time before bed, he reached out and gently touched her good hand. The contact was brief, but it sent warmth spreading through her over the following weeks as summer deepened and the Oklahoma heat grew even more intense. Penelope's arm continued to heal. She stayed at the Quinn ranch, helping Margaret with household tasks and increasingly spending time with Gabriel as he worked with the horses. He taught her his methods for gentling young horses, explaining his philosophy of patience and trust rather than breaking their spirit through force. "A horse that trusts you will give you everything," he said one day as they watched a 2-year-old filly respond to his quiet commands. "A horse that fears you will only obey as long as you are stronger, but the moment you are vulnerable, that horse will either run or fight. Trust is what makes a real partnership." Penelope thought about that, about trust and partnership, and she looked at Gabriel with new understanding. He was not just talking about horses. One afternoon in late July, Gabriel asked if she would like to ride out with him to check the northern pastures. Her arm was still in plaster, but Dr. Harrison had said gentle exercise was acceptable as long as she was careful. "I can saddle Daisy for you," Gabriel said. "She is the gentlest mare we have, and the ride is easy." Penelope agreed eagerly, desperate to be out on horseback again after weeks of confinement. Gabriel saddled Daisy, a sweet-tempered gray mare with soft eyes, and helped Penelope mount. Then he swung onto his bay gelding, and they rode out together across the prairie. It felt glorious to be moving again, to feel the sun on her face and the wind in her hair. Gabriel kept the pace easy, and they talked as they rode, pointing out landmarks and discussing the health of the grazing land. When they reached a small creek shaded by cottonwoods, Gabriel suggested they stop to rest and water the horses. They sat on the bank, and Gabriel produced a canteen and some biscuits wrapped in cloth from his saddlebag. "I asked my mother to pack something," he said with a slight smile. "I thought you might be hungry." "You planned this," Penelope said, amused. "I did. I wanted to get you out of the house, but I also wanted time to talk with you alone." Gabriel's expression grew more serious. "Penelope, these past weeks having you at the ranch, I have realized something. I look forward to seeing you every day. I think about you when I am working. I want to hear your opinions and your ideas. I want to make you smile." Penelope's breath caught. "Gabriel, let me finish," he said gently. "I know this is fast. We have only known each other a short time. But when I found you out on that prairie, when I saw what you had done for yourself with nobody's help, something changed for me. I saw a woman who was strong and capable and brave, and I knew I wanted to know her better. And now that I do know you better, I know I want more than that. I want a future with you if you will have me." Penelope looked at him, at his honest gray eyes and his strong, weathered face, and she felt her heart swell with emotion. "I feel the same way," she said softly. "These weeks at your family's ranch have been some of the happiest of my life. Not because of the rest or the help, but because of you. Because of the way you see me and talk to me and treat me like an equal. Because when I am with you, I feel like I can be fully myself." Gabriel reached out and took her good hand in his calloused fingers warm and strong around hers. "Then will you let me court you properly? I want to do this right, Penelope. I want your father's blessing and time for us to be sure, but I already know what my heart wants." "Yes," Penelope said, feeling joy bubble up inside her. "Yes, I want that too." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but she did not want to. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet, a kiss full of promise and hope. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. They rode back to the ranch in high spirits, and that evening Gabriel spoke privately with Silas Fairchild, who had come for his regular visit. Penelope waited anxiously in the parlor with Margaret, who seemed entirely unsurprised by the turn of events. "I hoped this might happen," Margaret admitted. "You two are well suited. Gabriel needs someone strong and independent, someone who can be a true partner to him, and you need someone who appreciates your strength rather than trying to limit it." When Gabriel and her father emerged from Thomas Quinn's study, both men were smiling. Silas came to Penelope and took her good hand. "Gabriel Quinn has asked permission to court you," he said. "I gave him my blessing. He is a good man, Penelope, hardworking and honest. I think you could be happy with him." "I think so too, Papa," Penelope said, her eyes shining. The rest of the summer passed in a golden haze of happiness. Penelope's arm healed slowly but steadily, and by late August Dr. Harrison was able to remove the plaster cast. Her arm was thinner and weaker than before, but otherwise undamaged, and he praised her again for the skill with which she had set the initial break. "You saved your own arm, Miss Fairchild," he said. "The bone healed straight and true. With exercise and time, you will regain full strength and mobility." Gabriel helped her with the exercises Dr. Harrison prescribed, patiently supporting her arm while she worked through the movements that would restore her strength. They spent every day together now, sometimes working with the horses, sometimes riding out to check the boundaries of the Quinn property, sometimes just sitting on the porch talking about their hopes and dreams for the future. In September, as the brutal summer heat finally began to ease, Gabriel asked Penelope to marry him. They were standing in the barn, checking on a mare who was close to foaling, when he suddenly turned to her and took both her hands in his. "I know we said we would take time," he said, "but I do not want to wait any longer than necessary. Penelope Fairchild, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner, helping me build this ranch into something even greater? Will you face the future with me, whatever it brings?" Penelope felt tears of happiness prick her eyes. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Gabriel, I will marry you." He swept her into his arms and kissed her soundly, and the mare nickered softly in her stall as if offering her own congratulations. They were married in October, in a simple ceremony at the church in Tulsa with both families and half the town in attendance. Penelope wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her, and she carried a bouquet of late-blooming prairie roses that Gabriel had gathered himself. When they exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other through all the challenges life might bring, Penelope thought about that day in the canyon when she had set her own broken arm, never imagining that the man who would find her and help her would become the love of her life. At the reception, held at the Quinn Ranch with tables set up under the cottonwood trees, Thomas Quinn stood to give a toast. His health was visibly failing, his face gaunt and his breathing labored, but his voice was strong as he raised his glass. "To my son Gabriel and his bride Penelope," he said. "May they build a life together as strong as the one they have each already proven they possess. Gabriel, you have chosen well. Penelope, the day you set your own broken arm and walked out of that canyon, you showed the kind of strength and courage that built this territory. Welcome to our family." The crowd cheered and drank, and Penelope saw her father wiping his eyes, moved by the moment. She caught Gabriel's hand under the table and squeezed it, and he smiled at her with such love and joy that her heart felt like it might burst. They spent their wedding night in the main house, in the room that would now be theirs, and Gabriel was gentle and patient with her, taking time to show her the pleasures of married life. Afterward, they lay together in the darkness, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I never imagined this," Penelope said softly. "When my horse threw me and I was lying in that canyon with a broken arm, I certainly never imagined I would end up here, married to you, happier than I have ever been." Gabriel stroked her hair gently. "I thank God every day that I was riding those fence lines. If I had been anywhere else, I might have missed you. We might never have met." "Do you really think I am strong?" Penelope asked, voicing a question that had been in the back of her mind. "Or were you just being kind?" Gabriel shifted so he could look into her eyes. "Penelope, listen to me. You are the strongest person I know. Not just because of what you did that day, though that was remarkable, but because of who you are, how you face challenges, how you never complain or give up. You are strong in all the ways that matter, and I am so proud that you are my wife." She kissed him then, pouring all her love and gratitude into the kiss, and they came together again in the darkness, celebrating their union and their future. Life as a married woman suited Penelope. She and Gabriel worked side by side on the ranch, and she discovered that she had as much talent for training horses as he did. Together they developed a reputation for producing the finest quarter horses in the territory, animals that were fast, intelligent, and reliable. Buyers came from as far away as Texas and Kansas to purchase Quinn horses. Thomas Quinn died peacefully in his sleep the following spring, and Gabriel grieved deeply, but found comfort in knowing his father had lived to see him happily married. The ranch passed fully into Gabriel's hands, with Margaret staying on in the main house to help manage the household. Silas Fairchild merged his smaller operation with the Quinn Ranch, bringing his cattle and his land as Penelope's inheritance, and the combined property became one of the most successful ranches in the region. In the summer of 1884, 2 years after the accident that had brought them together, Penelope discovered she was pregnant. Gabriel was overjoyed, immediately becoming protective and concerned for her health, but Penelope laughed and reminded him that she had once set her own broken arm and walked several miles in the Oklahoma heat. "I think I can manage having a baby," she said with a smile. Their son was born in February of 1885, during a cold snap that left ice on the water troughs and frost on the windows. The labor was long and difficult, but Penelope faced it with the same grit and determination she brought to everything else in her life. When Gabriel was finally allowed into the room and saw his wife holding their newborn son, he had tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," Gabriel said, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "You are amazing, Penelope. You are so strong." They named him Thomas, after Gabriel's father, and called him Tommy. He had Gabriel's gray eyes and Penelope's dark hair, and from the beginning he showed signs of having inherited his parents' determination and spirit. Margaret doted on her grandson, and Silas was a proud grandfather who spent hours sitting with the baby, telling him stories about his grandmother and about the early days of the territory. The ranch house that had once seemed so large felt full and warm with the sound of a baby's cries and laughter. Penelope discovered that motherhood suited her. She nursed Tommy and cared for him with the same capable efficiency she brought to everything else, but she also made time to continue working with the horses. Gabriel built a cradle that could be carried out to the barn, and many days found Penelope training yearlings while Tommy slept peacefully nearby in the shade. Life was good. The ranch prospered, the family grew closer, and Penelope and Gabriel's love for each other deepened with every passing year. They faced challenges, of course. There were droughts and harsh winters, cattle rustlers and horse thieves, injuries and illnesses. But they faced everything together, drawing on each other's strength and never giving up. In 1887, their daughter was born, a fierce little thing with lung power that could be heard across the ranch. They named her Margaret after Gabriel's mother, calling her Maggie, and she proved to be as strong-willed and determined as her mother. Where Tommy was thoughtful and quiet, Maggie was bold and loud, charging into life with enthusiasm that sometimes alarmed her parents but always made them proud. Another son followed in 1889, whom they named James after Penelope's grandfather. He was the calmest of their children, content to sit and watch the world around him with solemn eyes, but he had a gift with animals that rivaled even Gabriel's. The ranch continued to grow and thrive. Gabriel expanded the horse breeding program, and Penelope took over management of the cattle operation, proving to have a shrewd head for business. They hired good hands and treated them fairly, and the Quinn Ranch became known not just for quality livestock, but for being a good place to work. Penelope's father lived to see all three of his grandchildren, taking great pride in the family Penelope and Gabriel had built together. He died peacefully in 1891, and they buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, next to the spot already prepared for when the time came to lay Margaret Quinn to rest as well. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Gabriel gave Penelope a gift. It was a small painting, commissioned from an artist who had passed through Tulsa, showing a woman standing alone in a vast prairie landscape with one arm bound in a makeshift splint, her face determined and unafraid. "This is how I see you," Gabriel said as Penelope stared at the painting with tears in her eyes. "Strong and capable and brave. This is the woman I fell in love with, the woman I will love until the day I die." "Gabriel," Penelope said, overwhelmed with emotion. She set the painting aside carefully and went into his arms. "I love you so much. Everything good in my life started the day you found me on that prairie." "No," Gabriel said softly, holding her close. "Everything good started the day you set your own broken arm and saved yourself. I just had the privilege of being there to help you the rest of the way home." They stood together in their bedroom, the room they had shared for 10 years, holding each other and reflecting on all they had built together. 3 children, a thriving ranch, a love that had only grown stronger with time and challenges. The years continued to pass. Tommy grew into a serious young man who loved books as much as horses and talked about becoming a lawyer. Maggie was fearless, riding before she could walk properly, already talking about breeding her own line of horses someday. James was quiet but observant, with a gift for gentling even the most difficult animals. Margaret Quinn lived to see all her grandchildren grown, passing away peacefully in 1899 at the age of 72. She died in her sleep, in the house she and Thomas had built together, surrounded by family. At her funeral, Gabriel spoke about his mother's strength and kindness, and about how she had welcomed Penelope into the family and loved her like a daughter. Penelope and Gabriel entered middle age together, their faces lined with years of sun and wind and hard work. their bodies bearing the scars of ranch life, but their love for each other undiminished. They still worked side by side every day, still made time to ride out together to check the far pastures, still talked late into the night about their dreams and plans. In 1902, Tommy married a schoolteacher from Tulsa, a smart young woman named Catherine who Gabriel and Penelope both adored. The wedding was held at the ranch, and as Penelope watched her oldest son exchange vows with his bride, she remembered her own wedding day and squeezed Gabriel's hand. Maggie, true to her word, started her own breeding program, focusing on developing a line of horses that combined speed with endurance. She had her father's gift with animals and her mother's business sense, and the Maggie Quinn line of horses quickly became sought after throughout Oklahoma Territory. James took over the day-to-day management of the cattle operation when he turned 20, freeing Penelope to focus more on the horse breeding side of the business. He was methodical and careful, and under his management, the cattle herds grew larger and healthier than ever. In 1907, Oklahoma became a state, and Tulsa began to transform from a frontier town into a real city. Oil was discovered, bringing wealth and change to the region. The Quinn Ranch, with its thousands of acres and valuable livestock, became one of the most prominent operations in the new state. Through it all, Penelope and Gabriel remained partners in every sense of the word. They consulted each other on every major decision, supported each other through challenges and losses, celebrated each other's successes. Their love story became something of a legend in the region, the tale of the woman who set her own broken arm and the cowboy who found her and saw her strength. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1912, their children threw them a grand party at the ranch. Half the county came to celebrate, and there were speeches and toasts that went on for hours. When it was Gabriel's turn to speak, he stood with his arm around Penelope's waist and looked out at the crowd of friends and family. 30 years ago, he said, I was riding fence lines and came across a woman walking through the Oklahoma heat with a broken arm she had set herself. I took her home to my mother for help, and I thought that would be the end of it. But I could not stop thinking about her courage and her strength. I told her then that she was stronger than anyone I knew, and 30 years later, I still believe that with all my heart. Penelope, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. Thank you for choosing to spend your life with me. The crowd cheered and applauded, and Penelope wiped tears from her eyes as she kissed her husband in front of everyone. She thought about that scared young woman in the canyon, forcing herself to set her own broken arm because there was no other choice, never dreaming that the worst day of her life would turn into the beginning of the best years of her life. Tommy and Catherine gave them 5 grandchildren. Maggie married late, at 35, to a horse breeder from Texas who was one of the few men who could match her passion and knowledge. James married a quiet woman from a neighboring ranch, and they had 3 children who all showed the family gift with animals. Penelope and Gabriel grew old together, their hair turning white, their movements slowing, but their minds sharp and their love unshaken. They watched Oklahoma change from territory to state to oil boom, but the ranch remained largely the same, a place of hard work and honest living. On a spring evening in 1925, when they were both in their late 60s, Gabriel and Penelope sat on the front porch of the ranch house they had shared for so many years. The sun was setting in a blaze of color, and they could hear their grandchildren playing in the yard. You ever regret it? Gabriel asked suddenly. Staying here, building this life with me, you could have done anything, gone anywhere. Penelope looked at him in surprise. Regret it? Gabriel, marrying you and building this ranch together has been the greatest joy of my life. Why would you ask that? I just want to be sure you are happy, that you have been happy all these years." She took his weathered hand in hers, feeling the familiar calluses and scars, the strength that remained despite his age. "I have been happier than I ever imagined possible," she said softly. "From the day you found me on that prairie and told me I was strong, you have seen me for who I really am. You have never tried to diminish me or limit me. You have been my partner and my love, and I would not change a single thing." Gabriel lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You are still the strongest person I know," he said. "And I still thank God every day that I was riding those fence lines." They sat together in the gathering dusk, surrounded by the land they had worked together, the family they had built together, the life they had created through love and partnership and unwavering commitment to each other. In the distance, a horse whinnied, and somewhere a grandchild laughed, and Penelope thought about how a single moment of courage in a canyon had led to a lifetime of love. Gabriel lived to be 72, dying peacefully in 1927 with Penelope holding his hand. His last words were to tell her that she was the love of his life, and that he would wait for her on the other side. The whole town turned out for his funeral, and the procession of people who came to pay their respects stretched for miles. Penelope grieved deeply, but she was sustained by her children and grandchildren, and by the knowledge that she and Gabriel had built something lasting together. She continued to manage the ranch with Tommy and Maggie and James, still sharp and capable even in her 70s. She lived another 12 years, dying in 1939 at the age of 79. To the end, she remained strong and determined, the woman who had once set her own broken arm in a canyon and walked out to save herself. Her last request was to be buried next to Gabriel on the hill overlooking the ranch, where she could rest beside the man who had loved her and seen her strength when it mattered most. At her funeral, Tommy stood to speak about his mother. He told the story of how she and his father had met, how Gabriel had found her walking through the heat with a self-set broken arm, how he had told her she was stronger than anyone he knew. He talked about the life they had built together, the ranch they had created, the family they had raised. "My mother taught me that strength is not about never needing help," Tommy said. "It is about doing what needs to be done, even when you are afraid or hurt or alone. She showed me that love is not about one person being weak and the other being strong, but about two strong people choosing to face life together. She and my father were true partners, and they built something beautiful together that will last for generations." The Quinn Ranch continued to thrive under the management of Tommy and Maggie and James, and then under their children and grandchildren. The story of Penelope and Gabriel became part of the family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The painting Gabriel had commissioned, showing Penelope standing alone on the prairie with her splinted arm, hung in the main house, a reminder of where it all began. Years later, when Tommy's grandchildren asked him about the woman in the painting, he would tell them the whole story. He would tell them about the day in 1882, when Penelope Fairchild's horse threw her in a canyon, and how she set her own broken arm and climbed out and walked through the Oklahoma heat until Gabriel Quinn found her. He would tell them how Gabriel had looked at her and seen not weakness but strength, how he had fallen in love with the woman who refused to give up, who faced her challenges head-on, who never complained or quit. And he would tell them that this was the foundation of the Quinn Ranch, built on love and partnership and mutual respect, on two people who had seen the best in each other and chosen to spend their lives building something together. The ranch that had begun with a broken arm and a chance meeting had grown into a legacy that spanned generations, all because one woman had the courage to save herself, and one man had the wisdom to recognize her strength for what it was. The story of Penelope and Gabriel became more than just family history. It became a testament to what two people could build together when they respected each other's strength and worked as true partners. Their love story, which had begun on a dusty Oklahoma prairie in the brutal summer of 1882, echoed through the decades, inspiring their descendants to seek partners who would see them truly, who would honor their strength rather than fear it, who would build beside them rather than in front of or behind them. And on the hill overlooking the ranch, two headstones stood side by side, marking the resting place of Penelope Fairchild Quinn and Gabriel Quinn. The inscriptions were simple. On Penelope's stone, she was stronger than anyone. On Gabriel's, he saw her strength and loved her for it. Together in life, together in death, their story complete, their love eternal, their legacy secure in the land they had worked and the family they had raised, and the example they had set for all who came after.